One simple mistake could forever ruin someone's life. And here we discuss what happens when Naruto Uzumaki is sent 10,000 years into the future and have no way to return. How would he adjust? Would he even adjust to this new state of living? Well, if you want to find out, sit back, relax, and enjoy, guys.
What if Naruto woke up 10,000 years in the future? Full movie by Anime King. Alright, let me tell you about the worst thing that can happen to a person. Not death, not defeat. The worst thing that can happen to a person is surviving something so completely that there is no road back. That the world you knew, the people you loved, the life you were building, all of it is just gone. Not taken, just gone, like it never existed, like you were the only proof it did. That is where this story starts. So let us go back to the beginning. Naruto Uzumaki is 18 years old. The fourth great ninja war is over. He helped end it. His body still carries the memory of everything that war cost him in the world. But he is 18 and alive, and Konoha is standing, and the people he loves are still breathing. That is enough. That has to be enough. He is not with Hinata. Not yet. There is something between them that has not been spoken out loud yet. The way certain things between people take time to become words. He is aware of her. She is aware of him. But the war ended and the world is loud, and there is always another mission, and the conversation has not happened yet. This particular mission is not a big one on paper. Intel has come in about a man operating in a border region between Fire Country and an unnamed stretch of disputed land. He calls himself Vessel. Nobody knows his real name. What they know is that he has an artifact, something old and strange, and that the people who have gotten close to it have not come back the same. Some have not come back at all. Tsunade has sent Naruto with a small team. Sakura is there, two others, a tracking specialist named Ryo and a barrier jutsu user named Tae. 4 people, in and out. It does not go in and out. They find Vessel in a stone structure built into a cliffside, and the moment they enter the outer perimeter, Naruto feels something wrong. Not wrong like a trap. Wrong like physics has a headache. The air is doing something it should not be doing. The light is hitting surfaces at angles that do not match the sun's position. Ryo's tracking sense keeps pulling him in contradictory directions. Whatever this artifact is, it is already operating. Vessel is in the central chamber. He is older than they expected, gray-haired and calm, and he is holding the artifact like he has been waiting for them. The artifact looks like a compass, but with too many needles, and they are all spinning and none of them are pointing north. He says, "I knew someone like you would come eventually." Naruto says, "Put it down." Vessel says, "I cannot control where it sends you. I want you to know that. I am not your enemy." Naruto says, "I said put it down." Vessel says, "It needs power to activate. Something like yours." Naruto hits him with a rinnegan. He does not hit the man. He hits the artifact in the man's hand because that is the tactical choice. Destroy the weapon, and the rinnegan connects and the world comes apart. It does not come apart loudly. That is the strangest thing about it. There is no explosion, no dramatic light show. The stone chamber just stops being the stone chamber. The air stops being air. Naruto feels Sakura's voice from somewhere behind him, and then the somewhere behind him does not exist anymore, and there is nothing. No direction, no sensation, no up or down or time. And then there is a ceiling. White ceiling. Flat and seamless in a way that stone ceilings are not. Lights built into it that are not fire and not anything he has a name for, steady and cold and bright. He is lying on a surface that is soft in a specific engineered way, not the softness of a mat or a bed he has ever slept on. His arms are heavy, and when he tries to move them there is resistance. He looks down. Metal cuffs, both wrists, both ankles, attached to the surface he is lying on by thick metal bars. He pulls. The cuffs snap, not like he pulled hard, like they were never built for what is inside him. The door opens immediately. 4 people in black body armor with weapons he does not recognize, long and made of metal, pointed at him. Behind them, a 5th person in a white coat is already talking in a language he does not understand. Naruto sits up. He feels wrong, not injured, wrong underneath the injury. His chakra is everywhere, spreading out of him like a cracked pipe. He cannot pull it in properly. It keeps bleeding out at the edges and he cannot find the center of it. He tries to reach for Kurama and gets a response that feels like a man waking up from a 3-day sleep, disoriented and unstable, not the solid wall of red chakra he is used to. Kurama says, inside his head, something is wrong with this place. I cannot feel the natural energy. It is not here. Naruto thinks, "What do you mean it is not here?" Kurama says, "I mean it is gone. I do not know where we are, but I cannot feel the world underneath us. The thing I use to anchor myself to the physical plane. It is not here." The person in the white coat says something else, and one of the armored figures moves forward with something in their hand, a small device. And Naruto raises his arm without thinking, and his chakra bursts out in a wave, and every piece of equipment in the room sparks, and the lights flicker, and the armored figures stumble back. He does not mean to do it. That is the problem. His chakra keeps escaping. Someone else comes through the door fast. Civilian clothes. They are holding a small device, and they move past the armored figures, and before Naruto can process the movement, he feels a sting in his neck, and everything goes gray at the edges, and he tries to hold on, and he cannot. He wakes up in the same room. Different ceiling. He is still on the soft surface, but the restraints are different. Heavier. He does not break them immediately because something in him sells weight, and he has learned, over 18 years of being himself, to sometimes listen to that voice. There is one person in the room, a woman, sitting in a chair on the other side of a small table. She is maybe 35, dark hair pulled back. She is not in a lab coat, and she is not in armor. She is wearing simple clothes, and she has a pad of some kind in her hands, flat and glowing, and she is reading from it. She does not look up immediately when he stirs. She says, in a language he somehow partially understands, which is its own strange thing he does not have time to think about yet. "You were sedated for 14 hours. Your body processed it faster than we expected." She says it like she is reporting the weather. He says, "Where am I?" She says, "That is exactly the question I was hoping you would start with." She puts the glowing pad down. She looks at him directly. She has the specific kind of calm that people develop when they have spent years sitting across from people in crisis without flinching. She says, "My name is Dr. Amara Voss. I work in cognitive integration, which means my job is to help people whose minds have been through something their minds were not built for." She pauses. "What is your name?" He says, "Naruto Uzumaki." She writes it down. He says, "How do I understand what you are saying?" She says, "You have been unconscious for 14 hours and we ran a language integration process." It is a standard procedure when we encounter someone whose baseline language does not match anything in our records. She says it simply, like this is a thing that happens, and then she looks at him and says, "I have to tell you something, and I need you to try to hear all of it before you respond. Can you do that?" He looks at her. He says, "Yes." She says, "You are in a city called Varan. Varan is located on the continent formerly known as the Eastern Landmass, which your language records suggest you might have called Fire Country." She pauses. "The civilization you came from, the one you remember, existed approximately 10,000 years ago." Naruto says, "What?" She says, "I know." He says, "That is not possible." She says, "I know it does not feel possible. But the readings we took when you arrived, the age markers in your biology, the language you were speaking, the physical evidence on your body, everything points to the same conclusion. Whatever the artifact did, it did not move you through space. It moved you through time." He is quiet for a moment. Kurama says, inside his head, very quietly, "I believe her." Naruto looks at the ceiling. He says, "Is there a way back?" She says, "That is what the specialists want to talk to you about." The specialists come in 2 hours later. There are 3 of them. Dr. Voss stays in the room and sits in her corner chair. The first specialist is a tall man in an expensive-looking coat named Director Soren Cade. He has the kind of face that is always doing a calculation. He introduces himself as the head of the Varan Regional Authority's Advanced Intelligence Division, which means nothing to Naruto, and then he sits down like a man who is used to rooms adjusting themselves to his presence. The second specialist is a historian. His name is Professor Elion Marsh, and he is about 60 years old, and he enters the room the way certain academics enter every room. Like he just remembered 6 things he wanted to say and is trying to decide which one to lead with. He is carrying actual paper documents, which is apparently unusual enough that Cade looks at the paper with mild irritation. The third is a medical technician named Yura who stands near the door and does not say much and watches everything. Cade says, "We want to understand what you are, not as a threat assessment, as a resource allocation." Dr. Voss says, "Director." Cade pauses. Dr. Voss says, "Perhaps we could start by letting him ask questions." Naruto says, "The artifact. Where is it?" Cade says, "We do not have it. You arrived without it. You arrived alone, no equipment, nothing except what you were wearing." Naruto says, "So there is no way back." Marsh clears his throat. He says, "The honest answer is that we do not know." We have theoretical frameworks for temporal displacement but no practical experience with it. If the artifact was the mechanism and the artifact did not travel with you, then we have nothing to reverse the process with even if we understood the process. He says it with genuine regret, the regret of a man who would love to understand a thing and knows he is not equipped to. Naruto looks at the table. Kurama says, "Do not break anything yet." Naruto says, out loud, "Tell me about this world." Marsh lights up. He talks for 40 minutes and Cade lets him because apparently even the director knows when to step back from a man in his element. Marsh talks about the continent structure, the city networks, the way the world is divided into regional authorities that are technically sovereign but practically interconnected because the economy requires it. He talks about the wars that have been running in the eastern and southern regions for 30 years, resource conflicts, mostly territorial inheritance disputes that have calcified into institutional violence. He talks about the absence of what the old records called chakra. He says, we have texts, very old texts, badly fragmented, that reference something called the life force or the inner energy. Some scholars believe it was literal, most believe it was metaphorical. He looks at Naruto carefully. The readings we took when you arrived suggest that whatever those texts were describing, you have it. Naruto says, and no one else does. Marsh says, not that we have ever encountered. No. Cade says, which brings us to the practical conversation. Cade is not subtle. He does not pretend to be subtle. He lays it out cleanly. The authority has enemies, real ones, not bureaucratic ones. There are factions operating in multiple regions that the authority has been unable to neutralize through conventional means because those factions have resources and infrastructure that match or exceed what conventional forces can bring. He says, we can give you everything you need to exist in this world. Documentation, housing, resources, access. In exchange, we ask for your cooperation on specific operational matters. Naruto says, you want me to fight your wars. Cade says, I want you to solve our problems. Naruto looks at him. He says, I want to talk to the historian. Alone. Cade pauses, then he nods and leaves and takes Yuro with him. Dr. Voss starts to rise. Naruto says, you can stay. She sits back down. Marsh sits across from him with his paper documents and his eager, careful eyes, and Naruto says, tell me everything you know about what came before. Everything. They talked for 3 hours. Marsh knows fragments, pieces, names that have been corrupted by 10,000 years of language drift that Naruto almost recognizes if he tilts his head at them right. A great war, a sealing, something that the texts call the binding of the great beasts, which Marsh says most historians believe was metaphorical but which Naruto now knows was not. A civilization that was advanced in ways that did not survive it, that left no infrastructure because the infrastructure was biological, was the people themselves. Naruto sits with all of it. He says, inside his own head where only Kurama can hear, they are all gone. Everyone. Kurama says, yes. He says, Sakura, Hinata, everyone. Kurama is quiet for a moment. Then he says, they lived their lives. 10,000 years of people lived their lives between their time and this one. He says it gently, which is not how Kurama usually says things, and Naruto understands that the fox is doing the best it can. He says, out loud to Dr. Voss, I need some time. She says, of course. She leaves. He sits in the room alone and he does not break anything and he does not cry, not then, not in that room with cameras he can feel in the walls. He sits with it the way you sit with something too large to carry, you just put it down in front of you and look at it and breathe. Kurama says, what are you going to do? He says, what I always do. Kurama says, and what is that? He says, figure out the next thing. He agrees to Cade's terms, not because he trusts Cade. He has met men like Cade before, men who run things from behind layers of institutional language and who think of people as assets on a ledger, and he has never trusted a single one of them. He agrees because agreeing gets him out of the room, gets him into the world, gets him information he cannot get from a hospital bed. He keeps Kurama completely to himself. He has felt the scans they ran on him. He has felt their instruments probing his biology, the way they registered his chakra network as a spinal irregularity, as something structural they cannot classify. They know he is unusual. They do not know what is inside him and he is not going to tell them. Kurama agrees with this assessment enthusiastically. The city of Varan is enormous. The first time he walks through it under escort, which is how the authority moves him for the first 3 weeks, he just looks. Towers that make the whole Kage monument look modest, made of materials he does not have words for, glass and metal and something translucent that changes color in the light. Vehicles that move without horses or chakra, on roads and above them. Screens everywhere displaying information, news, entertainment, things he does not have context for yet. People dressed in 1,000 different styles moving through it all like they have always lived inside something this large because they have. There is still poverty. He sees that immediately. Beneath the towers there are streets where the towers do not go, and the people on those streets look at the towers the same way people looked at the Hokage building from the lower districts of Konoha. The gap between the people who have and the people who do not is 10,000 years old and apparently unkillable. There are different cities across the continent and beyond it. Varen is one of the major ones, an authority hub, but there are others. Deska in the south, built around the coast, a port city. The industrial sprawl of Khalith in the east, where most of the resource conflict is centered. Moran in the north, a city that has technically been neutral in every regional conflict for 100 years because every faction needs its transit routes. The world is divided but connected, roads and airways and trade routes stitching it together even as the political structures pull it apart. And underneath all of it, the authority. Naruto figures this out slowly and then all at once the way you figure out most things about power structures. The regional authorities are not equals. There is a layer beneath the official structure, a coordination layer, where the real decisions are made. Cade sits somewhere in that layer, not at the top, but high enough that the people above him do not get involved in day-to-day operations. Naruto does not say anything about this. He watches and he learns and he keeps his conclusions to himself. His first operation is 3 months after he arrived. A faction called the Grey Line has been running weapons and personnel through a tunnel network under the Khalith Industrial District. Conventional forces have been trying to disrupt this network for 2 years. Cade hands Naruto a briefing on a flag glowing screen and says, "We need the network disrupted and the command infrastructure neutralized." Naruto looks at the briefing. He says, "How many of the people in this network are civilians who got in because they needed the money?" Cade says, "That is not a relevant operational parameter." Naruto says, "It is to me." There is a pause. Cade says, "A significant portion." Naruto says, "Then I am not killing them. I will dismantle the infrastructure and I will take down the command level and I will get you everything you need to prosecute whoever you decide to prosecute. But I am not killing civilians who needed work and found a wrong employer." Cade looks at him for a long moment. He says, "Acceptable. The operation takes 4 hours." Naruto goes in alone, which is his consistent preference, because teams slow him down and put people in danger he then feels responsible for. He moves through the tunnel network using a low-level sensory extension that his chakra allows and the authorities' instruments cannot detect, locating every person in the network before he moves toward any of them. He maps the whole thing in his head in 40 minutes. He identifies the 12 people running the command structure. He takes them down, not lethally, all 12, in a sequence that is over before anyone in the network can communicate upward or outward. Then he tears the tunnel infrastructure apart, not explosives. He uses his chakra to destabilize the structural load points in a calculated sequence and the tunnels collapse in sections, clean, surgical, only in the areas he needs collapsed. He is back at the authority building by morning. Cade looks at the report. He says, "Nothing about this matches any operational methodology we have." Naruto says, "I know." He does 3 more operations in the following 4 months. Each one ends with no civilian casualties and complete mission success, and the authority analysts staring at the debrief footage trying to understand what they're looking at. He hears the word impossible used in hushed voices twice in the hallways outside the debrief rooms. Kurama says, "They're starting to understand what you are." Naruto says, "That is fine. Let them understand, as long as they do not understand everything." He means Kurama. He still has not told anyone about Kurama. Every scan the authority runs on him registers the 9 tails as a biological anomaly, a massive energy signature with no clear source. Cade has asked about it twice. Both times Naruto has said it is a natural consequence of his physiology and changed the subject, and Cade has let it go because the operational results make Cade disinclined to push. It is 6 months after his arrival when they tell him about the team. Cade brings it to him as a practical matter. He says the authority has identified a group of 6 young specialists who have the potential to operate at the highest level but who are currently being wasted in mid-career assignments. He says the authority wants Naruto to train them. He frames it as an investment in the authority's long-term operational capacity. Naruto knows what it actually is. It is an attempt to build a second version of what he is, or as close to it as possible without whatever he actually is. It is also an attempt to give him something to be responsible for, something that roots him here, something that makes leaving more complicated. He says, yes anyway, because he is 20 years old and he has been alone in this world for 6 months and he is tired of being alone. The team assembles in a training facility on the lower level of the authorities' operational complex. 5 men and 1 woman. The men range from 20 to 24, all from different regional backgrounds, all carrying the specific physical efficiency of people who have trained seriously since they were young. They look at him with the polite skepticism of people who have heard impressive things about someone and are reserving judgment until they see it for themselves. The woman stands slightly apart from the group. Her name is Zara Hess. She is 20 years old, black hair cut close on one side, longer on the other. She is lean in the way that people are lean when they have pushed their body to its limits for years without ever quite having enough to eat. She has gray eyes that are doing an assessment of him right now that is more thorough than most Jonin he has met could manage. She does not say anything when Cade introduces her. The others nod or make some small acknowledgement. She just looks at him. He looks back. He says, all right, let us see what you can do. What they can do is impressive for people with no chakra. Genuinely impressive. The 5 men are skilled in the combat disciplines of this era, fast and tactical and trained in the use of the weapons this world uses. They work together with the ease of people who have trained together before. Zara is something else. She is faster than the others by a margin that is not small. Her instincts are not trained instincts. They are something older, the kind that come from years of genuine danger, of real situations where the wrong move ended things. She fights with a ruthlessness that is not cruelty. It is efficiency, the complete absence of hesitation that comes from a person who has done the math on hesitation and found it wanting. She is also, he notices, the only one who does not try to impress him. The others calibrate their performance to his presence. They push a little harder, take a little more risk, make choices that look good from where he is standing. Zara fights exactly the same way she would fight if he were not in the room. He respects that. She does not respect him yet. That is also clear. After the first session, she says, "You are not what I expected." He says, "What did you expect?" She says, "The director called you a force of nature." Forces of nature do not usually come in that size. She says it flatly, not as a joke, just as an observation. He says, "Give it time." She says, "I do not give anything time. I watch and I conclude." He says, "And what have you concluded?" She looks at him, those gray eyes doing their calculation. She says, "Not enough yet." And she walks away. The first month is difficult. Not because anyone is actively hostile. Because the team is good enough to have its own internal culture, and that culture does not automatically make room for someone new, even someone nominally in charge. There are small challenges, nothing open, just the constant low-level friction of a group that has not decided to accept someone yet. Zara is the hardest, not because she is aggressive. She is professional, she follows instruction, she executes, but she does not give him anything beyond what the role requires, and she is watching him in a way that is not evaluation so much as audit. Checking every statement against observed behavior, keeping a running ledger. He does not push, he trains them and he waits. The thing that changes it is a mission. 3 months in, Cade assigns the team to an observation operation in Deska. Low-risk information gathering. They are monitoring a Grey Line affiliated network that has been moving personnel through the port. Naruto goes with them. He is not supposed to engage unless the situation escalates. The situation escalates. A Grey Line response team arrives at the location the authority team is observing from, and the engagement is fast and ugly, and the team is good, but they are outnumbered 2 to 1 and they are fighting in a compressed space with limited cover. Naruto moves. He does not use his full capability. He has not used his full capability in front of the team before. But he uses enough. He moved through the Grey Line response team like they are standing still, which from his perspective they nearly are, and he is precise and controlled, and he does not kill anyone, and the whole thing is over in about 90 seconds. The team stares at him. One of the men, the oldest one, a 24-year-old named Cassian, who is usually the least expressive person in any room, says, quietly, "What was that?" Naruto says, "That was enough to end it." Zara is looking at him differently than she looked at him an hour ago. Not with awe, something more specific. She is recategorizing him. He can see it happening. She says, "You have been holding back in training." He says, "Yes." She says, "Why?" He says, "Because if I show people what I can really do right away, they either stop trying or they start being afraid of me. Neither of those helps you get better." She thinks about that. She says, "How much have you been holding back?" He says, "Quite a bit." She is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "Show me." He shows her, not everything, but enough that it is honest. In the training room the next morning, he runs through a fraction of what he is, the speed, the endurance, the sensing range, the way his body heals, a shadow clone demonstration that causes the entire team to go very still. Zara watches all of it and does not say anything for a long time afterward. Then she says, "All right." And that is the moment the ledger shifts. Over the following months, the team becomes something real. Naruto is a good teacher. He has always been a better teacher than he gives himself credit for, and he understands these people the way he has always understood people, through the thing they cannot quite hide, the shape of what they want and what they are afraid of. He pushes each of them at the exact right angle. Zara he pushes hardest. She can take it and she knows it and she almost seems to need it, like she has been waiting for someone who would not ease up on her. He learns her story in pieces, not from her directly, not at first. He learns it from the edges, from what she does not say, from the choices she makes in the field that tell you everything about where someone comes from. She grew up in the Eastern Conflict Zone. Her family had been there for generations, farmers, not political, just people who lived where they lived because their parents lived there. The war that had been running in the East for 30 years did not stay in the infrastructure. It came for the people in it, and it came for her family when she was 12 and she survived because she was not home, and she has been building herself into something that would never be caught off guard like that again ever since. He does not say any of the things people usually say when they hear something like that. He just listens. She says, "I want to stop it. The war, the whole thing, not just the battle. The system that makes the battle happen again every time it stops." He says, "I know that want." She says, "Do you?" He says, "I watched a war consume everyone I knew. I was inside it. I helped end it." He pauses. Ending it and stopping it from starting again are two different things. She says, "What is the difference?" He says, "Ending it is one moment. Stopping it from happening again is every moment after." She looks at him. She says, "You talk like someone much older than you look." He says, "I am." He does not explain that and she does not ask. They are comfortable with each other by 6 months into the training assignment. Not friends exactly, something more functional than friendship. The kind of familiarity that comes from working alongside someone in real situations enough times that you know how they think before they tell you. He starts to look forward to the training sessions in a way that is about her specifically. He notices this. He sits with it. He has not looked forward to something that was about a specific person in a long time, and it sits in him strangely, not unpleasantly, just strangely, the way any feeling that is new after a long time without it feels strange. Kurama notices too. Kurama says, inside his head, on an unremarkable Tuesday morning, "You're looking at her again." Naruto says, "I am her teacher. I am supposed to look at her." Kurama says, "Not like that." Naruto does not respond. Kurama says, "I am not telling you not to. I am just noting it." A year passes. He is 21. He has been in this world for 2 years now. The team has become the best operational unit the authority has. And Cade brings this up in briefings with a satisfaction that makes Naruto's jaw tighten slightly because Cade's satisfaction is always ultimately about Cade. The world is still at war in the East. The Grey Line Network is not the only one. There are 3 other factions running operations in the Khalith region alone, and the authority has been chasing the same territorial problems in circles for years. Naruto goes on operations. He dismantles things that need dismantling. He comes back. He trains. He watches Zara become something remarkable. He and Zara are on a solo observation assignment in Morin when the conversation happens. They are in a high building watching a street-level meeting below them, and the meeting is running long and they have been sitting in the dark of an empty office for 4 hours. She says, out of nothing, "You never talk about home." He says, "No." She says, "Is it because it hurts?" He is quiet for a moment. He says, "Yes." She says, "I do not talk about mine either." He says, "I know." She says, "Does it get smaller?" The hurt. He thinks about it honestly instead of giving her the answer that sounds like the right thing to say. He says, "No, but you get bigger, and at a certain point you are big enough that the hurt is not the largest thing in you anymore." She thinks about that. She says, "I like that." They sit in the dark for another hour. At some point their shoulders are touching and neither of them moves away from it. The meeting below them ends. They pack up. They go back. Nothing is said, but something has shifted. It shifts further over the following months, slowly and naturally, the way things shift between 2 people who spend enough real time together. There is no dramatic declaration. One day they are close in a way that is new, and the next day they are closer, and neither of them marks the specific moment because it does not have a specific moment. It just becomes true. By the time he is 23, they are together. They keep it quiet, not hidden exactly. The team is not oblivious. Cassian says nothing but stops being surprised when they arrive at briefings from the same direction. They keep it quiet because the authority keeps careful records of everything, and they both understand, without saying it out loud, that anything Cade can use as leverage he will. Naruto is 23, and for the first time in 3 years he is something other than sad. Kurama says, "She is good for you." Naruto says, "I know." Kurama says, "She is also dangerous for you. Not her, the way you feel about her. It is the first thing in this world they could actually use against you." Naruto says, "I know that too." Kurama says nothing after that. He does not have to. The years stack, the operations continue. The team remains the best the authority has. Naruto's capability in the field has become legendary within the authority's internal records and has stayed entirely off any public document because Cade understands the value of a secret weapon. The world outside the authority's careful information control has heard nothing about Naruto Uzumaki. He is 25 when he starts to see the cracks. Not cracks in the team, cracks in the thing underneath the authority. He has been watching for 3 years, and he is good at watching, has always been good at reading people and systems. And what he has been reading for 3 years is that the story Cade tells about the authority does not match the world the authority produces. The factions the authority fights are real. The enemies are real. But the war in the East, the 30-year war that the authority is supposedly trying to end, has not gotten shorter. It has stayed exactly the same length for 30 years, which means something is maintaining it. Something needs it to continue. He starts to look at the contracts. The resource flows, the intelligence that gets acted on and the intelligence that gets filed and forgotten. He starts to follow the money the way Jiraiya taught him to follow chakra trails, not in a straight line but in the direction it is actually moving. What he finds takes his breath away, not because it is complicated, because it is so simple. The authority is not fighting the war. The authority is managing the war, keeping it at a specific temperature, hot enough to justify the authority's existence and budget and reach, cool enough that it never resolves into something that would require an actual ending. The factions are not being dismantled. They are being maintained. The operations Naruto has been running have been surgical removals of specific leadership within specific factions at specific moments. Not because those leaders were the most dangerous, but because removing them kept the internal power balance of those factions at the level the authority needed. He has been a scalpel and a surgeon who is operating to keep the patient sick. He tells Zara, he does not plan to tell her. He comes back from his 3rd day of following the money trail and she is in his space and she looks at him and says, "What did you find?" And he tells her. She is quiet for a long time. Then she says, "My family." He says, "Yes." He says it carefully, "Your region, the conflict that killed your family. It could have ended 20 years before it reached your family. There were 3 negotiated ceasefire agreements that the authorities' proxies undermined from the inside." She sits down. He says, "I am sorry." She says, "Do not be sorry." She says it quietly and it is not about him. She is doing the thing she always does when something is large. She is compressing it, making it into fuel. "I want to see what you found." He shows her everything. She goes through it with the same systematic thoroughness she brings to everything, checking his reasoning, finding the supporting data, adding 2 things he had missed because she has different access than he does. When she is done, she looks at the floor. She says, "What are we going to do?" He says, "I have been thinking about that." He has been thinking about more than that. He has been thinking about something specific for 2 months, building it quietly in the hours after missions when the authorities' monitoring of him is at its lowest. He has been working on a space-time technique, an ninjutsu application of something he observed in the dimensional work he has been doing since year 1, trying to build a door back home and failing, but learning from the failure what can be done with dimensional space even if the specific door home does not exist. He can move, not across time, but across the space of this world, from one point to another, instantaneously. He has been testing it in small increments for 2 months and it works. He has been keeping it away from every scan the authority runs on him and they have not detected it. He has a way into the authority's secure facility. He has a map of the facility from 3 years of operational briefings. He has a plan. He has not told Zara about this part. He tells her now. She listens to all of it. She says, "You have been building this for 2 months without telling me." He says, "I did not want you involved until I was sure it worked." She says, "I am already involved." He says, "I know. I am sorry." She looks at him for a moment. She says, "You were protecting me." He says, "Trying to." She says, "Naruto." He says, "I know." She says, "Tell me the plan." He tells her the plan. The next day, everything changes. Cade calls them both in separately. Naruto goes first. Cade is in his office on the executive level, the office that overlooks the north side of the city, and he is behind his desk with two other people Naruto does not recognize, which is always a signal. Cade says, "We have become aware that you have been accessing records outside your operational clearance." Naruto says nothing. Cade says, "We want to discuss the terms of your continued engagement with the authority." Naruto says, "What terms?" Cade says, "Expanded terms. More operational responsibility, more resources, a permanent position within the senior structure." He says it like a reward, like this is a conversation about promotion. Naruto says, "And if I decline?" Cade says, "I would hope you would not decline. You have built something real here. Your team, your work, Zara." He says the name carefully. The way you say a name when you want the other person to understand the name is a variable. Naruto says, "What did you do?" Cade says, "A precautionary measure. Standard protocol for assets at your level." He says it with the comfortable language of a man who has practiced saying ugly things in clean words. She is healthy. She will stay healthy as long as we are working together effectively. Naruto sits very still. Kurama says, inside his head, with a fury that Naruto has not felt from him since the war, "Do not show them anything yet." Naruto says, out loud, calmly, "I understand." Cade nods. Naruto says, "I will need some time to think about the terms." Cade says, "Of course." Tonight. Naruto says, "Tonight." He leaves the office. He walks back to his quarters. He sits down and he breathes and he lets the fury move through him the way he has learned to let large things move through him, not holding it, not suppressing it, letting it go all the way from one end of him to the other and out. Then he opens his eyes. Kurama says, "What did they put in her?" He says, "I am going to find out." He reaches his sensing range out across the facility. He is careful about this. He has always been careful about this, keeping his sensing range suppressed around the facility because the instruments here are good enough to partially register it. But he reaches out carefully, like feeling in the dark, and he finds her. She is in her quarters. She is sitting. She is alive, and inside her, in the tissue of her left arm near the brachial artery, there is a device. Small. He cannot feel its exact function, but he can feel that it does not belong there and that it has a mechanism, something that could be triggered from outside, and he knows what triggered mechanisms placed near major arteries are for. He goes to her. He tells her. She looks at her arm. She does not panic. She is not someone who panics. She says, "Can you get it out?" He says, "I need to be honest with you about something first." He tells her about Kurama. He tells her all of it, not just the name, the 9 tails, the ceiling, the war, the way the fox has been living inside him since before he was born, and the way they have built something over 20 years that is not just a parasite and a host but something more complicated and more real. He tells her because if he is about to do what he is going to do, he is not doing it with a secret this large between them. She listens to every word. She says, "So when they scanned you and found the anomaly?" He says, "That was Kurama." She says, "And he has been there this whole time." Kurama says, inside his head, "I would like to register that I have been an excellent housemaid." Naruto says, "He says he has been an excellent housemaid." Zara looks at his arm where he gestured. She says, "Tell him I appreciate the restraint." Naruto relays this. Kurama is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "I like her." Naruto says, "He likes you." Zara says, "Good, now get this thing out of my arm." He places his hand over the device. He can feel it now that he is close, a small cylinder about the length of a finger joint, sitting against the artery wall. He reaches into it with the most precise chakra application he has, the kind of fine control he developed over years of medical support in the field, and he feels the device's attachment points, the microscopic anchors holding it in place. He releases them one by one. It takes 20 minutes. She does not move. She does not make a sound. When the last anchor releases, he draws the device up through the tissue slowly, carefully, his chakra moving around every vessel and nerve to avoid them, and it comes out through the skin of her arm like it was never there. She looks at the small cylinder in his palm. She says, "That was the most unsettling thing I have ever felt." He says, "Are you all right?" She says, "Yes." She flexes her arm. "Yes." She looks at him. "We have to move tonight." He says, "I know." He crushes the device in his hand. He goes to the secure facility at 2 in the morning. He goes alone. He does not tell Zara the precise sequence because he needs her not to be where he is going, and the best way to ensure that is to be fast enough that there is nothing for her to insert herself into. He moves through the walls of the facility. Not metaphorically, the authorities' facility has electronic security that is among the best in the world and physical barriers that are designed to stop any conventional threat. None of it is designed for a man who can move through space the way Naruto can move through space now, instantaneous displacement, point to point, no door required. He moves through the sublevels in 4 jumps. Each jump lands him in the exact position he mapped in his head from 3 years of briefing documents. The security systems register anomalous readings at each point, and by the time they register, he is already somewhere else. He finds Cade in the operational center on the lowest level. Cade is awake. It is 2 in the morning and Cade is awake and he is watching screens, and this tells Naruto that Cade knew something was coming. Not what or when, but that the general shape of the evening was not going to be a quiet one. Cade says, "I hoped you would think about this more carefully." Naruto says, "I did think about it carefully." He is standing in the center of the room. There are 12 armed guards. He counted them on the way in. Cade says, "You cannot destroy this institution without destroying the stability it provides. The factions you have been fighting exist in opposition to what we do. Without us, the balance of power in every region collapses within a year." Naruto says, "You have been maintaining a war that has killed civilians for 30 years. Cade says, "We have been managing a war that would have been worse without management." Naruto says, "I know people who believe things like that, who thought the suffering they were allowing was smaller than the suffering they were preventing." He pauses. "They were wrong too." Cade says, "If you expose us, the chaos that follows will kill more people than the war you are angry about." Naruto looks at him. He says, "I know." He says it quietly. He has thought about this. He is not naive about what an institutional collapse looks like. "I am not going to expose you publicly. That is not what this is." Cade says, "Then what is this?" Naruto says, "This is me leaving, and you letting us go, and you understanding what happens to this facility and every piece of intelligence in it and every operational asset you control if you send anyone after us." He holds up the hard drive he pulled from the record system on the way in. He says, "I have everything. I have the contracts, the operational directives, the communication records going back 15 years. I have the names of the individuals in every regional authority who have been coordinating with you. I have all of it. If anything happens to me, if anything happens to Zara, if anyone with authority connections comes within a mile of either of us, this information goes to every independent journalist and independent investigative body on the continent simultaneously." Cade says, "That would destabilize half the governments on the planet." Naruto says, "Yes, so do not make me do it." Cade looks at him for a long time. Naruto says, "I am not your enemy. I never was, but I am done being your asset." The room is very quiet. Cade says, "If we ever need you." Naruto says, "You will not contact me." Cade says, "And if we have no choice?" Naruto says, "You will figure something else out." He takes the information he needs to remove himself and Zara from every authority database. He takes documentation for both of them, the new identity infrastructure that the authority builds for its assets. He takes resources because starting over in a world you did not grow up in requires resources. He is back in the facility entrance in 8 minutes total. He walks out. Zara is waiting at the building they agreed on, 3 blocks from the facility, a bag over each shoulder. She looks at him when he arrives and he looks at her. She says, "Did you kill anyone?" He says, "No." She says, "Did you make your point?" He says, "I think so." She says, "Good." She shoulders her bag. "Where do we go?" He looks at the city around them. Varen in the early morning, still lit, never quite sleeping. This enormous complicated world that he fell into, and that has become the only world he has now. He says, "I have been thinking about Morin, the neutral city, the one that everyone needs and no one controls." She says, "That is a good place to start." He says, "It is not home." She says, "No." She looks at him directly. "But it is a start." He thinks about what he said to her once about hurt getting smaller. He thinks about a ceiling in a hospital room he woke up in 5 years ago, not knowing what year it was or where he was or if anything that mattered to him still existed anywhere in the world. He thinks about Konoha, about Sakura and the others, about the life that is 10,000 years behind him and as gone as anything can be gone and still be something he carries. He thinks about Zara standing at the edge of a building in Desco with her shoulder against his in the dark. He says, "Let us go." They walk out of Varen together in the early morning, through the streets under the tall towers, toward whatever comes next. He does not know what comes next. He has never known what came next. He has only ever known how to move toward it. Kurama says, inside him, very quietly, "She will be all right with you." He does not respond, but he thinks that Kurama is probably right. They walk. The city falls behind them. The road opens up, and Naruto Uzumaki, 18 years old when the world ended and 25 years old in a world 10,000 years from the one he knew, walks into the morning of something that has not been named yet. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. The end.
That's it. Plenty more to come. I'm out for now. Peace, guys.